Okay, let's talk about bans, exploiters, and whether Steven just smashed the ban hammer loud enough or tapped it gently like he was scared to wake the neighbors. Steven Sharif's recent statement addressed what many players have been waiting for: action against bad faith testers. On paper, the response looks solid: 19 permanent bans, 16 suspension, dozens of warnings, and over 250 penalties ranging from experience resets to full account wipes. It's a breakdown that at first glance seems to say, we're not messing around. But here's the kicker. The announcement feels about as clear as a foggy mirror. Sure, we know how many accounts were affected, but not why. What exploits got those 19 accounts banned? What behavior qualifies as extreme harassment? It's like being handed a rulebook with half the pages missing. And in a game still in development where player feedback shapes the future, clarity and communication is everything. So here's the real question. Will this response be enough to discourage future exploiters, or does the vagueness leave too much room for doubt? If good faith testers lose confidence, it could undermine the collaborative effort that defines Alpha 2. And today we'll dig into whether Intrepid's hammer hit hard enough, or if it's just left everyone guessing what the rules even are. Steven's announcement came with a detailed breakdown of the actions taken against disruptive players in Ashes of Creation's Alpha 2. 19 accounts were permanently banned for the remainder of Alpha 2 for repeat exploiting. 16 accounts received 5-day suspensions for exploitative behavior. 3 accounts were permanently banned for obscene naming violations and racist chat behavior. 37 accounts were issued warnings for extreme harassment. 173 accounts had their experience adjusted and inventory removed for first-time exploiting. 83 accounts experienced full account wipes for their first-time exploitation. On the surface, this looks like a strong response to bad faith testers. But when you start asking questions, cracks begin to show. What exploits led those to permanent bans? Were they manipulating critical systems, or were they just gaming poorly balanced mechanics? And what defines extreme harassment? Is it targeted griefing, or are we talking about something broader like lewd comments in global chat? These numbers send a message, but without specifics, it's like reading a mystery novel with no ending. Good faith testers deserve to know where the line is drawn. And for exploiters, the vagueness might even feel like a loophole. Transparency could have turned this announcement into a definitive statement of intent, but instead it leaves players wondering, did Intrepid just draw the line, or is it still moving? At first glance, Intrepid's response seems like a decisive move against bad faith testers. Bans, suspensions, account wipes. On paper, it's all an oppressive list of consequences, but when you dig deeper, you start to wonder if this was a real hammer strike or just a warning shot. Take the 19 permanent bans for repeat exploiting, for example. Without knowing what those exploits were, it's hard to gauge if the punishment matches the offense. Were these players breaking the game in ways that threatened its integrity, or were they simply pushing early implemented systems too far? Similarly, 37 warnings for extreme harassment raise another question. What qualifies as extreme? Is it verbal abuse, targeted griefing, or something entirely different? Then there's the softer side of the response. 173 experience adjustments, 83 account wipes, and 16 temporary suspensions. These penalties suggest leniency for first-time offenders, which might seem fair, but also risks being perceived as too forgiving. For players who exploit the system, a temporary inconvenience might not feel like much of a deterrent. Ultimately, the strength of Intrepid's response isn't just in the numbers, it's in how the community perceives those actions. Without more context, this announcement risks leaving both good faith testers and exploiters in a fog, unsure of what to expect next. While Intrepid's actions demonstrate a willingness to address disruptive behavior, the leniency shown to first-time offenders raises an important question. Does this approach risk encouraging exploiters to test the limits again? With 173 accounts receiving experience adjustments and inventory removals, and then 83 accounts facing full account wipes, most of the penalties feel more like warnings than consequences. Here's the problem. Players who received only a slap on the wrist might not feel deterred. For some, especially those willing to exploit during the testing phase, the opportunity to continue testing boundaries could outweigh the inconvenience of having progress reset. Worse, without clarity on what actions led to these penalties, it's hard for the community to judge whether the consequences were appropriate or effective. This leniency doesn't just affect exploiters, it risks alienating good faith testers. These are the players investing their time and effort to provide meaningful feedback, only to see exploiters treated with what could be perceived as kid gloves. If testers feel that their work is being undermined by a lack of accountability for bad actors, trust in the testing process could erode. Leniency can have its place, especially in a testing environment, but paired with vague communication, it risks creating an atmosphere where exploiters feel emboldened rather than reformed. Without clearer enforcement and a firmer stance on repeat offenders, this measured approach could do more harm than good. But while it's easy to focus on the risks of leniency, there's another perspective to consider. Intrepid's approach might be deliberately measured to foster collaboration and learning. After all, Alpha 2 is still just a testing phase, where mistakes are expected and feedback, not just punishment, is the ultimate goal. Take the 173 accounts that received experience adjustments and the inventory removals, or the 83 accounts that faced full account wipes. These players clearly crossed a line, but rather than shutting them out entirely, Intrepid gave them a second chance. It's a strategy that, in theory, encourages testers to learn from their missteps and continue contributing in a positive way. However, this approach hinges on one key factor: follow-through. Without clear boundaries or consistent enforcement, leniency can easily be mistaken for weakness. Good faith testers need reassurance that repeat offenders won't continue to exploit the system, and exploiters need to understand that their actions will have escalating consequences. Intrepid's reliance on robust analytics tools to monitor activity is a promising sign, but transparency is just as critical. Players need to know where the lines are drawn and what happens when those lines are crossed again and again. A measured approach can work, but only if it's paired with clear communication and a commitment to accountability. Whether this strategy builds a more constructive testing environment or leaves room for doubt will depend entirely on how Intrepid handles future violations. Steven's announcement shows that Intrepid is taking a stand against disruptive behavior in Ashes of Creation's Alpha 2. The scale of their response, 331 actions ranging from bans to account wipes, sends a strong message on paper. But as we've seen, the effectiveness of this response isn't just about the numbers, it's about how players perceive it. The vagueness of the announcement leaves room for interpretation, and not in a good way. What defines extreme harassment? What were the exploits that justified permanent bans? Without these details, the community is left guessing where the lines are drawn. For good faith testers, this lack of clarity can feel like a missed opportunity to set clear expectations. For exploiters, it might feel like there's still room to push boundaries. At the same time, Intrepid's measured approach offers a chance for reform. By giving first-time offenders a chance to learn from their mistakes, they're creating space for collaboration and growth. But for this strategy to work, it needs to be backed by consistent enforcement, clear communication, and a willingness to escalate consequences when necessary. So what do you think? Was this response enough? I think time will tell. But one thing is certain. The success of Ashes of Creation depends on Intrepid's ability to strike a balance between leniency and accountability, and on the community's trust that Intrepid can get it right. That's all I have for you today. You're welcome.